In 2013, Naughty Dog released The Last of Us, one of the most polarizing and intense games of all time. With phenomenal writing, music, and a story that is now a cult classic, one would have to think, how could they even improve with a sequel? The answer? Play The Last of Us Part 2 and find out for yourself, because this is a true work of art in gameplay and storytelling. Hey guys, Game Prime here, and this is my review of The Last of Us Part 2. Now this game has been very controversial, both for good and for bad. I for one will say right now, I love this game. There aren't many flaws in the game both from a narrative and a gameplay point of view, and it is an amazing evolution of storytelling in video games, as well as improving upon an already masterpiece of a gameplay formula. There won't be any heavy spoilers in this review, as all footage will be taken from trailers and the state of play that was released prior to this game being released. There will, however, be full spoilers for The Last of Us Part 1, as that should be a given. So with that, let's get into it. From the moment you start the game, you will understand that this is a direct continuation of the story that was being told in The Last of Us Part 1, while still fleshing out the dangerous world and adding in new dynamic characters filled to the brim with personality. The Last of Us Part 2's story takes place 4 years after the events of The Last of Us Part 1. After killing all the Fireflies and lying to Ellie about having no cure, they have settled down in Jackson County, Wyoming in the settlement his brother Tommy runs. Trying to cope with surviving the Firefly Hospital, Ellie and Joel become a bit distant, which is a long-running arc within this game. Joel's lie to Ellie is at the heart of this story, and without it, would be no Part 2. Every single thing that happens in Part 2 is a direct result of the last 15 minutes of The Last of Us Part 1. Without knowing the heaviness of Joel's decision will result in lesser appreciation of the story Naughty Dog is telling in this game. Now you're probably realizing I'm being more descriptive of the details of the first one than actually telling the main plot of this game. That's because without spoiling anything, I cannot give a direct statement on the quote-unquote plot of the game. So without saying much more, something happens within Jackson County that makes Ellie set off on her adventure of revenge. Revenge and hate is also a very heavy point of the story. Creator and writer of The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann, has stated that since the first game was focused on love and the formation of the relationship between Joel and Ellie, that Part 2 will be about revenge and hatred. I personally enjoyed the story a lot in this game, and feel like it added a lot to the story of the first one, and it humanized so many characters a lot more than Part 1 did. The pacing of this game's story is a little odd, but if you're able to figure out why it was written the way that it is, then I believe you'll find an even deeper appreciation to the story that coincides with the game's themes of hate and revenge. The Last of Us is a third-person shooter, action-adventure, and survival horror game masterfully crafted into one. This game takes the gameplay of Part 1, which was everything I just stated just a second ago, and improved on it times 1,000. It is one of the smoothest, most realistic games I've ever played. The main source of gameplay is your combat, where you can choose to either stealth kill most of your enemies, use your guns and other weapons, or just try and sneak around and avoid groups in their entirety. Just like the first game, once you find ammo for your many weapons, you need to make sure that every shot counts. At first, within the first few hours of the game, I thought that there was way too much ammo compared to the first game, but then I realized that because they were in Jackson and supplies were easier to get, that it made sense that there was so much ammo. You also need to find supplies to craft a wide variety of items like health kits, Molotov cocktails, ammo for your guns, etc. Supplement pills also return from The Last of Us Part 1 so you can unlock more skills like improved health kits, faster stealth kills, and things like that. Training manuals also return in Part 2, however, they play a bigger, more important role than what they did in Part 1. Once obtained, they will unlock more branches of upgrades that you could use your supplements on, and by doing so will help you in gameplay. Just like in Part 1, there are a wide variety of collectibles for you to collect that tell a story all on their own, along with safes which also return from Part 1 but in a bigger way. You now have to find the safe code, and then you'll be able to unlock it. Doing so will reward you things like ammo and crafting supplies. I really enjoyed finding every single safe code and unlocking every single safe in the game. There are also a few new gameplay mechanics that they introduced in this game, like ropes and generator wires that can be swung over fences and windows to reach locked doors. I really like this mechanic, and I'm still impressed with the work that had to go into making puzzles like these a reality. Speaking of locked doors, they now replaced shiv doors from Part 1. These locked doors can now be unlocked by either smashing a window next to it, or as just mentioned, finding a way around and into the area. I really enjoyed the traversal of this game, and trying to figure out puzzles was a nice getaway from the combat. I could tell they incorporated the rope mechanics from Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy, so it was a neat and subtle callback to the last few Naughty Dog games. Speaking of being inspired by something from Uncharted, the sliding mechanic from Uncharted 4 now makes its debut in The Last of Us Part 2. The enemies and AI in this game are top-notch. These guys are not dumb at all and will find you if you're not careful. There are a few new groups in this game that you're going to have to face, like the WLF and the Seraphites, each with their own distinct fighting styles and tactics. The WLF has dogs, which can track your scent and find you. As horrible as it was killing these poor dogs, you kind of needed to in order to progress. Naughty Dog stated that killing them would be completely optional, but there were many times where I feel like I did not have a choice. Although it's a really good way to put you in Ellie's shoes and making you feel like there are consequences behind your actions and choices. It wouldn't be the world of The Last of Us without the infected. Every single class of infected returned from Part 1, as well as adding in some new classes of infected like the Shamblers. These guys reminded me a lot like the bloaters from The Last of Us Part 1, while the bloaters in this game feel more tough and harder to kill than in Part 1. In a way, this makes sense, since all those bloaters are now a few more years older and realistically should be harder to kill, since the infection got worse. The infected are also way more smarter than they were in the first game, and are very dangerous if you aren't prepared. Ellie is way more nimble than Joel is in Part 1, and has some new moves to her disposal. Brawling with enemies and infected is entirely different now due to Ellie's ability to dodge enemy moves. This is the biggest part to the combat of Part 2. It is essential that you learn how to dodge correctly because it will help you out big time. There is no longer just smashing an enemy's head into a corner of a table and calling it a day. Ellie can also jump a tiny bit since she's lighter than Joel, and she's also able to prone crawl, kind of like Solid Snake. I really like this addition as well since you're able to sneak around in tall grass even more so than ever before. The gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2 combines the best of both worlds between The Last of Us Part 1 and Uncharted 4. It is some of the most realistic combat and action sequences I've ever witnessed in a video game. Naughty Dog always goes above and beyond with the presentation of their games. This game is no different. In an all-new and an improved Naughty Dog engine, this is their most beautiful-looking game yet, and one of, if not the best-looking PlayStation 4 game to date. The lighting and detail to every character is just incredible. You can visibly see veins, cuts, sweat, and muscles moving on characters. It's incredible how much detail and effort they put into this game. The animations are beautiful and the performance capture is top-notch. Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, and Laura Bailey bring so much life into this game. This game has an all-star cast of actors and actresses that make this game as special as it is. The way every character interacts with each other is what makes this game and every single Naughty Dog game special. Along with the names previously mentioned, I also have to include Shannon Woodward and Jeffrey Pierce for amazing performances as well. Without them, this game would not be what it is, and it's some of the most realistic and believable acting I've ever seen in any medium. The game ran at a steady 60 frames per second, but has some rare dips here and there, but nothing that made me nauseous or uneasy. I did have one glitch early on in the game that I will show here, where my horse got stuck in a stairway and disappeared, requiring me to restart the area. That was the only time I witnessed any glitch of any sort, though. Aside from that, this game ran flawlessly. Also, the transitions from cutscene into gameplay was just as incredible as it was in Uncharted 4, and the only main loading screen was the first one when you booted up the game. Along with running pretty flawlessly, this game has the most insane accessibility options I've ever seen for a video game. There are so many different HUD options, colorblind options, visual and audio clues. This is a game that has been crafted perfectly for anyone to enjoy. The audio design is also top-notch and sets a new standard for any game that comes after it. This is easily Naughty Dog's best performing game, though I can still argue that Uncharted 4 can give any game a run for its money from a performance and graphics point of view. Let me just say that I love the soundtrack of The Last of Us Part 1, and I think it's one of the most impactful, most emotional soundtracks ever created for a game, or any medium for that matter. This game's soundtrack was once again composed by the genius that is Gustavo Santaolalla, as well as Mac Quayle. Gustavo composes the story cutscenes, while Mac composed the combat themes and the music that appeared in violent cutscenes. I would love to say that The Last of Us Part 2 has a better soundtrack than Part 1, but it doesn't. This music is still very good, but there aren't too many memorable songs unlike the first game. Maybe this is because the game is still fresh and new in my mind, and will take some time for the soundtrack to be embedded into my head. Any other way, it's still a good soundtrack and hits hard when it needs to. To Gustavo and Mac, thank you for a great soundtrack once again. As a general statement, let me just say that music has a big part in The Last of Us Part 2, and is in a sense the bread and butter to a lot of emotions that you will feel throughout the game. The Last of Us Part 2 definitely won't be everyone's cup of tea, and that's completely fine. Some may not like the pacing of the story, or the decisions made within it, but try and go into this game with a full understanding of the original and with an open mind. This world is not pretty, and actions have consequences. This is a game that will be controversial, probably forever, and that's completely fine. I, for one, feel like I understand the story that Naughty Dog was telling, and it's honestly a tough pill to swallow. I will carry the weight of this game on my back for a long time, just like the original. At the end of my playthrough, I was just sitting in front of my television, emotionless. Take that as you will, but I really enjoyed my time with this game, even though it can be uncomfortable and unsettling with the story decisions. But that's the world these characters live in. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes there won't ever be light at the end of the tunnel, but the journey and self-reflection and learning about who you really are on the inside is what matters most in The Last of Us Part 2. It is one of the most polarizing games I've ever played, and I don't think I've ever seen anything humanize characters like this game has. It's for that reason that some people are absolutely going to despise this game, because every single scene and every single decision made by characters in this game have a consequence. This is one of the most heartbreaking, realistic stories ever told in any medium, and that is honestly everything I ever wanted out of a sequel to The Last of Us. Make me uncomfortable, make me hate, make me vengeful, but also make me understand and make me grow as a person as I watch these characters try and do the same. All these are themes that you will witness throughout this game, and themes that I witnessed in my 25-hour journey with these characters. It's honestly tougher than I imagined giving this game a score, but The Last of Us Part 2 still gets a perfect 10 out of 10 from me. It's uncomfortable, brutal, violent, but also tells a story worth telling and makes you realize that actions have consequences. This is a game worthy of calling itself Part 2. It is a continuation of Joel and Ellie's journey in every sense of the way and is masterfully crafted into a new story of its own. The Last of Us Part 2 is not a game for everyone. Some will love it, some will like it, some will hate it, and some will even petition to get it rewritten. But I think if you enjoyed The Last of Us Part 1 and understand the story fully and what Joel's decision at the end of that game meant for the world and every character in that world, then you should pick up this game because it's a perfect sequel in the most uncomfortable ways possible. Thanks for watching my review of The Last of Us Part 2, guys. This game was one of the most intense journeys I've ever played, and I can't wait to see what Naughty Dog does next. I would normally say let me know what you guys think of this game, but because this game is so controversial, I frankly don't really care what anyone thinks of this game. I know what I believe in, and that's good enough for me. Hopefully you could feel the same way after you experience this game as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you back here very soon with another review. See you all next time.